Have all members present with the exception of Councillor Smith. You may begin.
All right, thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Planning Committee meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all members of the committee, both in the room and joining us virtually this evening. And as well, I'd like to welcome all the members of the public who are watching us on the live stream this evening. We're glad that you're with us. So that moves us on to item 2, additions, deletions, amendments. Don't have any of those. And item 3 then is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those that you'd like to declare. Don't see any. Of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. That moves us on to adoption of minutes. We don't have any minutes, so we're right on to public meetings. And there are 3 public meetings on this evening's agenda. I'll just run through how those will work for those who are joining us so everyone is clear. Each public meeting will begin with a presentation from our planner, following which we'll open the public portion of the meeting, and that will begin with any comments from the applicant or their representative. And then we will hear from interested members of the public who wish to speak to any of the applications. And once we have heard from all the members of the public, we'll close the public meeting, and then there'll be an opportunity for members of council to ask any questions or make any comments that they wish to make. Of course, council will not be making any decisions on any of the matters that are before us in the public meetings this evening. The purpose of these meetings is to hear from the public and to have that the public comments, give the opportunity for those public comments to influence the recommendation of the planner. So decisions will be made at a later date. And at the end of each of the public meetings, I will ask the planner to advise the public as to where they can get more information on any of these files and where to get their name on the list to be kept up to date on any developments with any of these files. So with that, we'll begin. And our first public meeting is 5.1 Z 2022 -012 for Lord Elgin Estates Limited, Summerside Subdivision, Waterloo Street. And we will turn it over to the planner for the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to pull up my presentation. So as already noted, the application that's before you this evening is for a zoning bylaw amendment application. And this file is specifically Z 2022-12. It's for Lord Elgin Estates Development Limited. The agent who will also be on the line later today is MHBC Planning. And the site is actually located between Waterloo Street and Bruce Street. And this is in the north end of Port Elgin and just north of Mary Rose Avenue. So the purpose of this application is to rezone the lands currently known as Block 55. So they are a block within an existing draft approved plan of subdivision. And they are seeking to rezone these lands from R3, which is a residential 3rd density, to an R4 residential 4th density, with a special provision to allow a maximum building height of 6 stories, or in this case, 21 meters. If approved, the application would facilitate the development of these lands for 330 residential units. The applicant, as you can see on the site plan, is looking to build apartment buildings. There are 3 proposed buildings shown, and those would vary in height between 4 stories up to 6 stories. The massing of the building has been sited with the higher portions of the building towards the center portion of the site, as you can see from the attached plan. Based on some site photos of the property, so this particular photo is looking from Waterloo Street. Currently, Waterloo Street does end in a cul-de-sac bulb. it is intended that that street would be extended to concession 10, as would Bruce Street, which is on the opposite side of this site. But for the purpose of this photo, I'm looking from Waterloo Street, down Waterloo Street towards Devonshire. You can see the existing single-family homes that would back onto the south portion of this property, and there are some existing apartment dwellings further in the background along Devonshire. Again, this is looking towards the existing single-family homes on Mary Rose from Waterloo Street. And this is showing from Waterloo Street over to Bruce Street, which just terminates just at the single-family homes along Bruce Street and Mary Rose. And this particular photo is taken from Bruce Street. You can see some of the fencing of the single family homes just to the side of that photo. And this is looking towards concession 10. So with respect to this particular proposal, we did look at several matters when preparing our report. We did look at the provincial policy statement as well as the policies of both the county official plan and the Saugeen Shores official plan, and as well as the zoning, existing zoning on the site and the proposed zoning for the property. So the subject lands, as noted, are located in the north end of Port Elgin. They are considered a primary urban community in the county official plan and residential in the local official plan. They are currently zoned R3, as already noted, and the applicant is looking to build a 3-story apartment building with approximately 330 residential units. In this case, the existing proposal, we did look at the efficient use of land and resources. So they are looking to do a higher density on this property, increasing from approximately 40 units per hectare to 90 units per hectare, which is what is permitted in the R4 zone in accordance with the local official plan policies. The proposal would have access onto Bruce Street and also onto Waterloo Street. And I'll perhaps go back to the slide that has a better overview of the area in general. So you can see the site here with the star. So it would have access onto Waterloo Street in this location to the east and to Bruce Street in the west. The subject property would connect to the existing services or planned services for this area, and they have demonstrated through their servicing study that they would have sufficient capacity, and this would be confirmed through the site plan approval process. The town has advised it would be subject to site plan control, and they've also demonstrated that they would tie into the existing stormwater servicing in this area as well. And that will also be confirmed in terms of design considerations through the site plan approval process, which would include, in terms of the case of stormwater management, the potential for an on-site stormwater management facility if the existing facility cannot accommodate the proposed development. In terms of the rezoning of the site, so with respect to the R3 zone, it does currently permit apartment dwellings and various other residential formats, including townhomes and semi-detached. In this case, the R4 zone does permit a similar dwelling type, but at a higher density and with increased side yard setbacks. So they would be changing from the R3 to the R4, which would allow for that greater density and increased side yard setbacks. The applicant has indicated that they would meet all the zoning provisions as it relates to the R4 zone. So for example, they'd meet all the setback requirements, the density requirements, as well as the landscaping provisions as well, as an example. But they are looking to increase the height from approximately 4 stories to 6 stories, or in this case, 21 meters in height. So a height of 20 meters is permitted elsewhere within the town, and that was approved through a bylaw in 2021. The subject property is not located in that specific area where the higher height is permitted. That is generally follows along Goderich Street and then on one street on either side of Goderich Street. So that is where the height is permitted to be 20 meters or 6 stories. This site is located just on the opposite side of Waterloo Street, so just outside of that area, but they are seeking to increase that height to 21 meters. In that regard, we did look at the existing height provisions and the setback requirements when you increase to greater stories. And in this case, county staff are looking to have further discussions with the applicant to see if they can increase the side yard setback where the building does exceed that 21 meters in height to approximately 13 meters. We also will have further discussions with respect to the rear yard setback as well, which typically increases as you get higher in building form. But in this case, for everyone's benefit, and I'll go to the next slide, the interior side yard setbacks are those which are along the south and north end of the property. Bruce Street would be considered the frontage of the property, and Waterloo Street would be considered the rear portion of the property. With respect to affordability, we also did note that the applicant is providing a rental housing, which is desired in the community currently, and that would be provided through these 3 buildings. The would be satisfying or meeting the county and local targets, which would require 30% of new housing to be in a rental format. So that certainly does contribute to that target. They'd also be providing a range and mix of housing types. In this case, they are providing the apartment format, which is desired in the community currently. And within the buildings themselves, they are providing studio units, single 1-bedroom units, as well as 2-bedroom units. The town has provided some comments back indicating that they'd like to have further discussions about the unit types to meet some of the demands that are known in the area. And those discussions will be ongoing and will follow through the site plan approval process. As it relates to compatibility, we did receive several comments from members of the public relating to compatibility of this apartment format, particularly with respect to the recently constructed single-family homes to the south. And so the local official plan does provide some direction with respect to compatibility, and it specifically identifies that there needs to be appropriate setbacks provided, screening, and buffering. So the setbacks are outlined within the zoning provisions, and as noted earlier, the county would be looking to see if we can increase that where the buildings are 6 stories or greater. And then through the site plan approval process, the town will have further discussions with respect to buffering, screening, parking layout, and some of the access points as well. Some of the other public comments did speak to transportation concerns. So the applicant has prepared a transportation study, which looked at the existing conditions within the current road system. And they also projected that out until full build out, I believe it was to the year 2025. And they have identified that their existing intersections are working within the approved capacity limits in the area, and that with the full build out of this property, as well as some of the other developments in the area, that would not exceed and require any further upgrades to the road system to accommodate this new development. They've also identified through the traffic study that there would not be a need to make the connections Waterloo Street and Bruce Street specifically to concession 10 at this point in time. Those are anticipated to occur in later phases of the overall subdivision development. But for the purposes of this development, if it were to advance, there would be no need to make those connections at this point in time. And with respect to agency comments, as some of those comments were already articulated, the town would be looking to work with the applicant to diversify potentially the mix of dwelling units within the buildings themselves. They'd also be working with the town through the site plan, or with the applicant through the site plan approval process, to address issues such as buffering, access, fire access, and housing attainability. The county also did receive comments from our transportation division, and there were no concerns expressed. And we also received comments from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, which also identified no concerns with the proposal. The Blue Water District School Board, as well as the Bruce Grey Catholic District School Board, also provided comments. They had no objection to the proposal. The Blue Water District School Board did ask specifically for some conditions, which we understand can be included through the site plan process, and we will pass those over to the town staff for that purpose. And we did receive several public comments. I believe at the time of this report, we had included 9 public comments or from households in the area. And we have received some additional comments. I believe we're up to 17 comments from members of the public who had expressed either objection or concerns or questions relating to this proposal. And those specifically related to density, height, traffic, noise, and privacy. So just as a recap, this application is seeking to rezone the lands from R3 to R4 and to also increase the height from the current permitted 12 meters to 21 meters. And if approved, that would facilitate an apartment development on the subject lands. So this recommendation is for your consideration at this point in time, and we will bring up a report back at a later date with staff recommendation on this application. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Sure. Okay. So we'll move on now then to the public portion of the public meeting, and we will begin with any comments from the applicant or their representatives. We have 3 names on my list: Mr. David Ashton from MHBC Planning, Mr. Steve Cobain from Cobide Engineering, and Mr. Matt Brower from Paradigm Traffic Consulting. And so are any of those folks on the line, and do any of them wish to speak? I see Mr. Ashton there. So yeah, the floor is yours, sir.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau. And yes, with me tonight are Matt and Steve, our project team, and really here to answer questions there. I'll give a very brief presentation, as I don't want to duplicate the work that Karina's done to pull together her presentation. Do want to share my appreciation for the work that she's done and the coordination with herself and Jay as we've been working through this. We have received the comments as late as later this afternoon. So what I will try to do in my presentation here is respond to some of those with some visuals. Don't intend to duplicate, again, the presentation. So the proposal for the zoning bylaw amendment, we have some renderings for the site. This would be the 6-story building. So this is the south end of the site that's on this presentation cover. This was summarized by Karina in her presentation. I would just note there are 2 portions of buildings proposed at 21 meters, not all of the buildings, and I can get into that a little bit more. We've given quite a bit of thought to the design considerations and the site layout, and I do appreciate the comments from the public that did provide some suggestion for further consideration of the design, and I think that there were some very good comments there that we can take back and give some thought to. But the intent was really to locate the building massing away from the existing residential and to put it toward the 15-meter wide trail to the north. The setbacks that are currently proposed from the existing residential are ranging from the 4-story building of approximately 18 meters and the 6-story building of approximately 25 meters. So there's no concern in dealing with the increased setbacks from the interior side yard line that there was some discussion about tonight. The access and parking, the proposal is to maintain the town's requirements for parking. We know that details associated with access locations would occur at the time of site plan approval, and we would be working with town staff through those details. So there's a number of details that will follow with site plan consideration. This just gives you a bird's eye view of the proposed site plan. I think one of the interesting comments that was raised is by one of the public is looking to maybe change the on the building to the right, the 6-story building orientation, and push that further away from the residential. So as I mentioned, we're here to receive information and comments, and willing to look at how the site plan comment concept comes together. This is the site plan that that you've seen. There were some questions as far as showing amenity spaces. This is what's proposed as part of the town site plan approval process. The details associated with the amenities would be put together in the site plan and landscape plan, and then become a site plan requirement. There is a requirement for providing amenity space per unit, and that's what is being proposed here. And just in general, from a marketing approach, what's being proposed is to create really a block, a community that provides amenity and recreational opportunities for future residents. As I look at this plan and to think about where we may be able to adjust some of the public comments, we could look at, as I mentioned, orientation of the buildings. We have, as I mentioned, no issue with the setbacks. We could look at potentially landscape buffer adjacent to the existing residential, and something a little more enhanced there. We did complete a shadow analysis, which we'll be sharing with county and town staff. What I can share is there's no impacts associated with shadows on the existing residential uses, just given the orientation of the units and the location of those lots. So we'll be sharing that information. And then here, just again, conceptual renderings of what's proposed for the building design and the elevations. And we, as mentioned previously, we've prepared a planning justification report, the functional servicing and stormwater management report. It's concluded that there's sufficient infrastructure from a sanitary and wastewater and water perspective, and that the stormwater management for this block has generally been considered with the broader subdivision, and the traffic impact study has looked at this block in addition to any background traffic, which would include other development within the area, and concluded that there's no improvements required to support the proposed development. And again, was part of our submission. It's our opinion that we have a proposal that's consistent with the objectives of the PPS and development within urban areas and municipally serviced areas, and supporting housing choice and opportunity within the town. Similarly, with the County of Bruce official plan, we're conforming with the intent of the town official plan and supporting the housing objectives. The town's official plan includes criteria for consideration of new high-density residential and where such areas could be located. And the planning report includes an analysis of those criteria and concludes that what's being proposed is appropriate on the basis of those criteria. Sufficient municipal services exist, and details associated with the site design will be addressed as part of the site plan review process. And as we have done in the past, we can work with the town and the county on a future report that would outline direction to the site plan design through the report, such that those matters are considered as part of the site plan review process. And that's our presentation for this evening. But as I mentioned, we have the team here and happy to answer any questions and come back if needed to respond to any public comments or questions as well, Mayor Charbonneau. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Aston. Then if that's all the comments from the applicant for now, we will move on to hearing from members of the public who wish to speak to us, and I have three on the list here this evening. And the first one is Divya Mistry. Do we have Divya Mistry with us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we do not yet. No.
Okay, so the next one I have then is Mr. Ryan Clark. Is Ryan with us? Oh,
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. The floor is yours, sir.
All right, well, I just got the information today. So it looks like there's a lot of information there with the traffic study and the groundwater study and everything. That was a good presentation. Thanks, Dave. So I've got, I live in this area, and so I've got some questions here. So I'll just try to work through these questions here, and really appreciate the opportunity to ask these questions. So has this development, like I understand there's a developer, but has it been sold to a specific builder? Like I see the name Zeckelman Industries on the drawing. Is that who the builder is?
Why don't you, Ryan, if you want to work through all your questions for us, and then I'll turn it over to the appropriate people to answer them all in one go, okay?
Sure, okay. With this zoning change, can the building contain condominiums instead of apartments? Because condos would provide the opportunity for people to own and invest in the place that they live. Apartment buildings, they don't provide that same opportunity for people to invest in the place they live in. When is the construction on the property expected to start? Will the bordering residential houses be taxed less because their property borders on high density housing? And is there a guarantee that this development will have a dog run, sports courts, playground, outdoor amenities, and gardens? Those are all my questions for now.
Okay, great. So we have a few, and I'll turn them over one at a time to Mr. Aston or whoever he thinks can answer them. So the first one is, do you have a builder for the project?
Through Mayor Charbonneau, there's I guess an arrangement between Summerside Holdings, Lord Elgin Estates, with a provider or a builder. So there is someone in place that specializes in this type of modular construction, and so that's referenced Zeckelman Industries. So that's someone that Lord Elgin Estates has an arrangement with, and would likely move forward should the zoning get approved.
And on the, so then the next one is on the question of ownership. Are you considering condominium ownership, or is it all rentals?
Through Mayor Charbonneau, at this point, everything is looking to be as kind of a purpose-built rental approach. We recognize the need for both ownership opportunity and rental opportunity, but at this point, this is being proposed as a rental opportunity.
Okay, and do you have a sense if you were to receive zoning approval, what sort of construction timelines you're looking at?
I think the answer to this is always really as soon as possible. But we know that there's timing associated with the consideration of the bylaw and then site plan approval. So in an ideal world, it would be starting to be getting working on the site preparation and servicing sometime this fall. But again, that's subject to approvals process for the development.
Sure. The next one had to do with taxation, and I can address that one. Your taxation for all properties is assessed by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and so they will at some point, they haven't actually done a reassessment in a number of years, but at some point they will do a reassessment, and they'll make those determinations as to what the property or how what the value of all properties in the community are based on whatever criteria they're using at the time. And so the final question had to do with all of the other amenities that are on the site beyond the buildings themselves. And just a comment about your intent to proceed with those things if the zoning were approved?
Yeah, through Mayor Charbonneau, I think it's a good comment. There is intent to provide a range of amenities on the site. I don't know that I can guarantee those exact amenities, but that's what the site plan is showing. And for this type of development and with the community, we're seeing really the need to provide those amenities. The location of them, again, based on some of the other comments that I saw as far as orientation of buildings and setbacks, it may change the layout a little bit. So I don't know that I could guarantee those exact areas and amenities, but I can suggest that there will be a significant amount of amenity, and that's the intent, to provide a mixture of amenities.
I think one process note to make, of course, is if the zoning is approved by council, there will be a subsequent site plan approval process, which will involve sort of the detailed design of the site, including all of whatever of these elements are to be included. And I think town staff, as well as the applicant, will take into account what we hear from the public now and in the coming days when that site plan, if that site plan process takes place subsequent to a zoning amendment being approved. So does that answer all your questions, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, thanks so much. That answers
Okay.
all my questions. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. All right, so now we're on then to our only other member of the public who's speaking to us this evening, and that's Jim Campbell. Do we have Jim Campbell? There he is. Jim, the floor is yours. Why don't you unmute yourself? There you are, sir.
Hey, hello, Jim Campbell. Thank you for letting me voice my concerns. I apologize. I'm not a public speaker, not very good at this. But first I would like to ask everybody how they would like 330 apartments put directly in their backyard. That's, if you look at the site plan, I know we had pretty pictures of, but never showed the actual houses. You look at it, 330 apartments right at their back fence. And to me, their only protection from this nightmare is to keep it an R3. That's what they bought the house at, R3. And now you want to change it to an R4. I have a lot of concerns with that. Sorry, I made a couple notes. I got to try to find.
No worries, take your time.
Thank you. I noticed today they were saying on Bruce Street was going to be the front entrance. That is news to me, but consider this. Front entrance is Bruce Street. And say you want to drive downtown. Your first left going towards downtown is Mary Rose Avenue. That's all single family dwelling residents there. Now you're going to have how many people driving, and they'll take their first left. They won't go to the roundabout. They'll go straight down that street. That totally changes the neighborhood. I'll go through a few more. I also don't think all these site plan controls, I don't think there's enough space in that place to do all the setbacks and give all the pretty things they put on their justification report. Let me just think. Yeah, oh, well, and I've talked to an architect, a building inspector, my friends, coworkers, family, and not one thinks that this is fair. I really want you to, I had asked the counselors to go down and have a look at the back of the houses to see how close this is going to be. It's going to be right, there's a parking lot right at their fence. And they bought this as a single family home thinking that it's all going to be single family dwellings behind them. Now you're going to put this apartment building, the light pollution, you didn't mention light pollution. You didn't mention that they're losing their R3 to R4. R4 is, you should have zoned it R4 to begin with. This isn't fair. And that's, any more comments?
Yeah, so I reside, my name is Bethany McCulloch. I reside on Mary Rose Ave. We're quite disappointed and surprised to learn this information. I reached out to the Port Elgin counselor twice by email. I have not received a response. I also reached out to Like Maya, I have not received a response, so
I did. But
I don't even feel like I've been heard or received an appropriate or compassionate response. Yeah, we're really disappointed. We feel like the plans that you're displaying don't accurately reflect what the neighborhood currently looks like. So the site plan picture with the green space around it is actually where my house is. So like if you're gonna reflect a site plan, at least show what like buildings actually exist there. Yeah, so I don't know. We're really disappointed. If we wanted to live in a neighborhood where there was a 6-story apartment building looming over our property, looking into our house and our backyard, we would have stayed in the city. We never would have returned to Port Elgin. So
also, I'd also like to say, I talked to Mike. He was very good. We had like a half-hour conversation, and I really appreciate his comments. But I also messaged every counselor 2 weeks ago and got no reply. I messaged again a week ago, still no reply. A little disappointed. I thought that's how council worked, but I don't know. I probably have a dozen other things in there, but I'm going to leave it at that.
Mr. Mayor, I'll ask some questions later, but I just want to clarify something. I'm looking, I don't know when that email was sent. You said I didn't reply to you, but Jim, I did talk to you for half an hour.
Yes, you did.
And this is your daughter, I think, your daughter?
No, it's daughter-in-law.
I'm sorry, daughter-in-law.
My future daughter.
I do take a fair amount of pride in getting back to people. I don't know what date that was, though. I don't see it. So
no, you're probably right, because I know you're very good with me.
yeah.
I'm not complaining about you, Mike. You're top notch.
No, and it's not specific to you. I sent the email over a week ago through the contact us page that I clicked your name. It said to email this counselor. I clicked that. I submitted my information asking for a phone call or an email.
Anyways.
Yeah.
I think
that's
unfortunately,
fine. I just looked. I just don't see it. That's all. But I don't like to be. But we'll move on.
yeah, no, I think, Frank, I think I haven't received those emails. I don't know if other members have, so I'm not sure what happened there. I'm sure you would have received a response had we gotten it. So I don't know. There's been
Every
some
single
sort of
one, twice.
Yeah, there's been some sort of issue anyway because we haven't received it. So, but I would encourage you to send an email if you want to send an email to council. Send an email to our clerk. Was it Linda Clerk at saugeenshores.ca? Is that or no? Clerk at saugeenshores.ca, and she'll make sure it gets to council. Anyway, sorry about that. We're always happy to hear from folks. But anyway, we're hearing from you now, and that's the reason for this public meeting. And we certainly appreciate your comments.
Okay, one more concern. I don't think enough neighbors got the message because their next door neighbor didn't even hear about it. So you might have got 17 complaints today, but most people didn't hear about any of this.
Okay, are there other?
Don't understand that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, and there aren't any other members of the public wishing to speak this evening. Is that right, Linda? We don't have any further members of the public?
That is correct. There's no further speakers.
Okay, so I guess that brings us to the end then of the public portion of the meeting, and we will now open the floor to members of council for any questions or comments, and we'll start with the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. First off, I'd like to thank everybody that presented tonight, putting their thoughts and concerns forward. I do believe that this is a good project. 330 units will bring in anywhere from 300 to 800 different people into our town, which is great. They are apartments, which we're sorely needing. The housing crisis can be helped greatly by this. What I would like to see, however, is 3-bedroom apartments. If you have a family, 2-bedroom doesn't quite cut it, but if we could get a bunch of 3-bedroom apartments included in this, I think that will go a long way in helping families. I really like the inclusion of your outside amenities, the gardens, courts, dog area, playground. I haven't seen anything like that since I lived in the city, and all the apartment areas that I lived in had all those, so those are great. I also think that town staff, and through you, Mr. Mayor, probably, we need to really be talking with the Blue Water District School Board. With the development that we have, there is no way that they can neglect or not look at Saugeen Shores for building adjustments that are coming, because we are at a max already. And when you start to add just the number of buildings that are coming in, we are in a crisis situation. So I think we really do have to be talking with them. But I just wanted to say, I like this. I look forward to seeing it. I know the developers will look after and look at the concerns that the residents have. So I look forward to this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mayette, and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and pull this a little closer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the presenters. It's certainly a very interesting proposal, and the adding of rental units is it's certainly on a high priority for Saugeen Shores. So, but at the same time, we need to take into account the concerns of the residents, and you know, Jim and your daughter-in-law. Just for your information, it's not your Saugeen or Port Elgin ward councillor. You should be calling it your Saugeen ward councillor, because you actually live in the Saugeen ward, not the Port Elgin ward. And I too did not receive your correspondence, or I would have surely reached out to you, Jim. I know you from past career. But like I say, it's an exciting development. One question I have for the developer is these amenities. They look very exciting with the dog park and the what looks like tennis courts and gardens. Would those amenities be controlled to be available to just the residents of those apartment buildings, or would they be considered a public park where anybody in the neighborhood could come use them?
You're muted there, Mr. Aston.
My apologies, through Mr. Mayor. At this point, the intent is that they would be part of the private development. We haven't discussed, you know, an opportunity of privately owned public space. That kind of brings on a whole new, interesting set of considerations. But I can bring it back and we can have some discussion. We haven't had that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 questions. The first one is, I guess, for Karina. I just want to clarify, I think from your report, you said that the R3 zone, which is what it's zoned as now, that would allow up to 4-story apartment buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Grace, through you, Mr. Chair. It does allow for up to 12 meters, which is approximately 4 stories, and apartment dwellings are permitted in this particular zone, the R3. Through the draft plan of subdivision approval, in this case, townhouses were identified as the preferred housing form.
Okay, so a follow-up for that particular question. Do you have an estimate of how many units would be in each story, approximately?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'd perhaps defer to Mr. Aston on that question if he has that information and the number of units per floor. I don't have that data.
Through Mayor Charbonneau, I could probably do some math, but it might take me a minute. If there may be some other questions, I'll see what I can figure out.
Okay.
If that's okay, I'll try
fine.
and get something general.
Okay, thanks. And I'm sure it would depend on whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, a studio or apartment would factor into that. So my next question, I think, goes back to Karina. One of the comments you made tonight was that county staff are having discussions with the proponent for when the height exceeds 21 meters. And I thought that this would indicate that 21 meters is the max.
Yes, my apologies, through you, Mr. Chair. I may have misspoken there. So the maximum height would be 21 meters. The current maximum in the town, not on this particular site, but just on the opposite side of Waterloo Street, is 20 meters.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess this goes back to Mr. Aston, my final question. The modular apartments that are described as being the type of construction by Zeckelman Industries, which is an international company, right? Based in the US, but has a subsidiary in the Kitchener area. Is that right? So
That's my understanding.
How many of these types of apartment buildings have been constructed? How long has this been going on? And what's the, I guess, what's the success rate of this type of construction in terms of its durability?
Through Mayor Charbonneau, I'll start with the first question, which was the units per floor. In the L-shaped buildings, I'll call it, I'd say approximately 50 units. And in the other building, approximately 30 units.
Okay, thank you.
Now, that's approximate because one of the benefits that I understand with the modular construction is that would be if those were all, for example, 1-bedroom units. So with the modular construction, it actually gives them a greater flexibility to provide 1, 2, and 3-bedroom unit types without significantly having to change the structural design. So that's something that, you know, we have been looking at, and we think there's a benefit to the modular construction based on the comments received and the understanding that there's a need for 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, which I understand is part of the marketing program and in any event that they're going to look at to provide that full range. How many projects have they done? I just have looked at their website. They've done numerous projects throughout North America for sure, high-rise residential, office buildings and such. And my understanding, they've been very successful and continue to grow as an operation. I can't comment on kind of the durability. I just don't have the information to comment on that. I could maybe get something and ask the group and get some information back to staff for council consideration.
Yeah, I would appreciate that if you could get, you know, how many years, how many decades perhaps has this type of construction been used in terms of numerous? Does that mean 3? Does that mean 20, 50? And then, yeah, what's the sort of success rate in terms of the longevity of these types of buildings? Thank you.
Hey, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Dave, thanks for your presentation. And Karina, thank you for your presentation as well. And to the residents, you know, Ryan and Clark, Jim Campbell spoke tonight, and his daughter-in-law. This is what these meetings are all about. And they're public meetings, and we were here to listen. And Dave, I heard you mention some things that maybe can be, you know, amended, adjusted if this rezoning application is approved, and I think that's why we're here. And you know, this is going from an R3 to an R4, and so it's going from 4-story to 6-story. People have some concerns. We just built on Mary Rose. That's fair. That's not unfair. This is a rezoning application, and they bought in an area where they thought it was R3. So, Jim, Dave, I think that, you know, you talked about reorientation of buildings, and I think that's really good that you've mentioned that right at the outset. I think that you know, the buffering. I know it's site plan control, Mr. Mayor. I get that. This is a rezoning application, but I think, Dave, to just store that thought away, if this is approved, that you know, that buffering for the Mary Rose residents is really important. It's really important because that's a big change for that neighborhood. There's no question about it. The rezoning application, if approved, I too, I know Councillor Matheson mentioned this, and I think Ryan Clark brought it up about the amenities. You know, those are pretty neat features for the neighborhood. I know it's not for the people surrounding, but for the people that live in that immediate neighborhood I'm talking about, the 330 units, there's some good features there. So I hope they're not lost with any reorientation, again, if it's approved. But those are nice features. Haven't seen something like that in Saugeen Shores before. So anyways, thanks for your openness, Dave. And I know you'll take those comments back. And, you know, I think the residents have got, you know, they raised some good concerns. So.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would love to take credit for all of the comments I suggested, but I did read through the public comments, and the reorientation of the massing was one of the public comments. So I think as Vice Deputy Mayor suggested, that is the reason that we get this input, because then we can take it back and assess the project and we'll work with Karina and Jay on something coming forward for council consideration, and talk to them about making sure we've got the setbacks figured out and the buffers sorted through as well.
Okay, Councilor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, thanks to our speakers and everyone that's taken part. And that includes those that have written the emails to us over the past little while. With that in mind, I'd like to ask first, I guess through you to Jay Posner, the land north of this development is undeveloped. Now, what are the plans for that? Does anyone know at this particular point in time?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yeah, the land directly to the north is proposed for single detached dwellings, much to the west as well. To the east of Waterloo is more high density townhouse development. I don't want to speak for the developer because their plans they haven't got that far, but the original approval from 12 years ago was more or less how I described.
Thank you. And to continue on, a lot of the comments, as Mr. Aston has said, concerned the people along Rose Avenue, Mary Rose, is it? Mary Rose? And they feel as if they're being pushed, crunched in there. And when they purchased, they were told it would be single family development elsewhere as well. Now, it's unfortunate that it's come to this, but answer me this. Could we, Mr. Aston, could we rejig both buildings, the big ones, 1 and 2, and then bring building 3 over to where it says outdoor amenity or in that area, and then move all the amenities closer to Mary Rose? Is that doable? Is it a pipe dream? I wonder.
Through Mayor Charbonneau, I think to Councillor Davinsky, we can take a look and come up with something conceptually, and maybe there's a way to shift things around, and we'll talk to the architect and look to see how we can maybe push away that the height. What I just would comment is under existing zoning, the R3, the 4-story building would be permitted to a certain setback. And I think we're actually a little bit beyond that. So trying to push the 6 stories further away, I think certainly that's a fair comment and something we can look at. And, maybe that bottom building 3, which is a 4-story building anyway, moves around back and forth, but it may not be the most significant move is probably changing where the 6-story height is, because immediate to the north of the property is the 15-meter walkway or greenway. So any future residential is going to be set back another 15 meters from the site because there's that built-in walkway already. So I think that's something we'll take back and take a look at for sure. And like I said, the parking right up against the rear lot lines, I think there's some room to maybe take a look at providing a bit more of a buffer there. And we can work with staff on even writing something into zoning there that would require something more than, a 0 meter setback, or maybe look at something a little larger there and write that into the bylaw so we don't leave it to the site plan and everyone's aware of what the proposal is.
Thank you, sir. That's encouraging. And the reason I ask this, Mr. Mayor, is that if we were to do that, then the residents already that have single family dwellings get what they paid for. The ones to the north where it hasn't developed yet, potential buyers would come in and they'll know right off the bat, this is what's next door. And then you make your decision there. That's all I have to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor, any further questions or comments from members? Don't see any. I guess it's important to just sort of reiterate the process so that members of the public are clear. Of course, what we're considering here is the appropriateness of the R4 zone over the existing R3 zone in this location. Essentially, that change entails increasing the permitted density on the site and also a change permitting increased height. And it's important to be clear, and I read in several of the public comments this idea, and I think it may have come as a result of some material put out either by the developer. I saw one letter included a map that wrote future townhouse development on the site, on this site. And I'm not sure who produced that map, but it's important to be clear that the zoning that's been in place for several years, this R3 zone does permit apartments on the site at 40 units per gross hectare. So indeed, a 4-story apartment building is permitted there today without any zoning change whatsoever. So I think that's, it's important to be clear. And I maybe, do we have a sense, maybe this is best put to Jay or possibly Karina, and I should remember this, when was that zoning established? Can you give me an approximate date when we established zoning on this site?
Karina, go ahead if you have it at your finger. I know I have a year, but I don't have a specific date. It's 2010. It was when they approved the subdivision, and it was done at that time.
Good enough. I didn't expect you to know the exact date, but yeah, that's right. So it's been about 12 years now that this has been zoned R3, and I think one consideration that we need to make, and that I think the planners ought to consider as they come back to council with recommendations on this, is how the needs of the municipality in terms of housing have changed in that time. I was on council in 2010 when we approved this zoning, and at the time, certainly R3 in this location looked pretty suitable. But the question is zoning at that level, does that meet the needs of the municipality today in this location? And I think, I think having some discussion when this comes back about what our needs are as we assess them now, and whether we need more density in all of our zones is something that we need to look at for the good of everybody in the community, given the housing crisis that we face. So I think that's an important subject point. Now, the only question that I had to do with, it was raised by Mr. Campbell, and it had to do with light pollution and the concern about light on the site. And I just wonder, could we get a comment perhaps from Mr. Aston, but perhaps also from municipal staff about first, what design considerations can be implemented to protect all neighboring properties, both existing and future, from light pollution from the site, and also what municipal regulations are in place to control light spilling off the site. Any comments on that?
Mr. Mayor, perhaps I'll answer, and then Jay or Karina can jump in on the site plan guidelines, but we will be required to do a photometric or lighting plan that does not allow light spill or foot candles off-site. What we can do is look at privacy fencing along residential. We can look at where we place the light posts and set them back. And we can also look at the type of lighting to ensure that it's directional and directional lighting and dark sky compliant. So it's facing down, it's got a specific direction, and then we can, the photometric plan then calculates the foot candles across the site, and we make sure there's no light spill. I think adding some additional buffer along the residential uses and maybe putting some planting in there, some trees and such will also help. And that's something we can look at.
And if I may, just to add, to confirm, our design guidelines do require those sorts of analysis. And then, of course, the teeth come in when they are integrated in the site plan agreement, becoming an enforceable bylaw. So there's at least some measure of enforceability. So if there's problems with replacement bulbs or something isn't functioning, we can follow up as needed.
Okay, good. So the neighbors can take some comfort, at least, that there are controls in place and some studies to be done to ensure that they're protected from light pollution. So if there are no further questions or comments, then I'll ask the planner to just let folks know if they would like more information on the file or want to be kept up to date on progress with the file, how they can do that.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. You can reach out to the county at our email address, which is bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca, or you can also contact us by phone or drop into our office, which is just located in Port Elgin as well.
Yeah, Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Karina, I meant to ask this earlier, but there was one comment one of the members of the public mentioned, and this is just an age-old problem, it seems, with people didn't get the notice, wasn't circulated. You've heard it before. We all have. Just remind us for all of council again, the circulation radius, please.
Yes, for a zoning bylaw amendment, it is 120 meters on the surrounding lands.
And Karina, why, like 120 meters doesn't, I don't know when that was established and when that was put in place so long ago, but just refresh my memory again. Why is it 120 meters and say not 300 meters? Just tell me again.
Those are set out in the Planning Act and the regulations. 120 meters is a standard requirement for most application types, other than I believe it's consents and variances, which have a lesser circulation radius.
Do we ever go further than that, or you pretty much stick right to the, like you exceeded a little bit or not, or what's your thought?
I'm not aware of it in my time at the county. I'm not sure if Mr. Aston has ever encountered through his file work larger areas required.
Yeah. Any comment, Mr. Aston?
Yeah, sure. We have seen larger areas included for, I would say, intensification, higher rise projects in urban areas. And at the same time, I've seen larger where it's in a rural area, and if you circulate 120 meters, you're getting 2 people, and maybe there's a larger impact. But typically, not. Everyone sticks to the 120 meters.
Okay. That's good. Thanks, Dave.
Yep. All right, thank you. Yeah. So if there's nothing, the other thing I'll just say, since there was a discussion about communications with council earlier, I'll just remind folks too that you can always contact all members of council by emailing the clerk at clerk@saugeenshores.ca, or you can email me at mayor@saugeenshores.ca, and I'll certainly make sure that council is circulated on any communication. So with that, that brings us to the end of this public meeting, and we will move on then to the next one. And that is 5.2 L 2022-001 by Jordan Moncrief and Brendan Watson for 827 Elgin Street. And we will begin with the presentation from the planner.
Thank you, Ms. Chabana. I'll just share my screen.
We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Barbara. Is there, turn your volume up, or maybe maybe your microphone isn't close to your mouth. Is that the problem? There it is.
change.
There you are.
Is that
That's
any
better.
better? Okay, thank you. I
Very good.
just need a few seconds to share my screen. Yes, good evening, committee. We have received an application for an official plan amendment. And this is in relation to the site with the civic address 827 Elgin Street, right here in Port Elgin. This site is within an established residential neighborhood. There's a cemetery to the east. The site is presently occupied by this bungalow. There is also a detached garage and 2 sheds. This photo shows the detached garage. There's that shed, which is situated between the garage and the lot line. That shed is too close to the lot line. The applicant says he's going to remove or relocate that shed elsewhere on the site. This proposal is for a 2nd-story addition to this detached garage in the form of a 1-bedroom apartment with bathroom and kitchen facilities, and also a dining area and a living room. This apartment would be approximately 84 square meters and just slightly smaller than the main dwelling, which is 97 square meters. So access to the apartment would be via an interior staircase, access from a common main door through the garage. Also proposed is an addition to the garage at the ground level. And this is mainly for the structure to meet the construction requirements for accommodating the 2nd-story apartment, and also to provide storage. The purpose of this application is to permit a secondary dwelling unit on the 2nd story of an existing garage. The local official plan currently permits a 2nd dwelling unit within a detached dwelling, a semi-detached dwelling, or a row dwelling in the residential designation. The site is in Port Elgin, which is a settlement area, and in the provincial policy statement, settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development. The provincial policy statement includes policy on providing adequate housing, specifically that planning authorities shall permit and facilitate all types of residential intensification, including additional residential units. The site is designated primary urban communities in the Bruce County official plan. That designation allows the full range of residential uses. The province recently amended the Planning Act to allow for municipalities to allow for additional dwelling units within a detached house, a semi-detached house, or a row house, and also within ancillary structures such as the detached garages. So last year, the county amended its official plan, given that direction from the province. The site is designated residential 2nd density. Sorry, the site is designated residential in the local official plan, and that designation allows the full range of residential uses. At present, as I mentioned, the official plan only allows 2nd dwelling units within the main house. So county staff are working with town staff to amend the local official plan so that it can conform to the upper tier official plan and also conform to the Planning Act. But this applicant is sort of in front of that process. They do not wish to wait for the town to get around to amending the official plan. The site is zoned residential 2nd density R2, and similar to the official plan, a secondary dwelling unit is only permitted within the main house. So the applicant has not filed a zoning amendment application. We have explained that if this official plan amendment application is approved, they still will not be able to get building permits because the proposal does not comply with the zoning bylaw. We have also explained that they have the option to wait for the town to amend its zoning bylaw, and then that way they won't have to spend any more monies applying for a zoning amendment. The applicant has submitted a planning justification report submitted by Mr. Ian Moncrief, and they've also submitted some garage and second story dwelling floor plans. We've circulated this proposal to the departments and agencies. There's no adverse comments. Comments are still pending from the conservation authorities. The town staff are very supportive of this proposal and have noted that including a housing option is needed in the community, that they understand this is being advanced because the town process to make the more general amendments is time consuming. They have commented that at the building permitting stage, the proponent should submit a grading plan and supporting information regarding rain events. The proponent should contact the Engineering Services Division for more information on how to address this matter. I've received comments from the neighbor to the east. I've met with them. They've expressed certain concerns. And then after that meeting, they've also submitted some written comments, which I'll incorporate in the subsequent reports. So the applicant, the neighbors have explained that they erected a fence within their property, but not at the common lot line. And when they look at this applicant site plan, it seems as if the applicant has measured their interior side yard setback to the fence on the east side. So they would like for us to verify the lot area and the yard setbacks for this proposal. So I have to sort that out with the applicant, and I will report back to committee at the subsequent meeting. They have asked about the required setback for from the garage to the east lot line. Because this structure is presently under 60 square meters, the setback requirement is 1.2 meters. But should the application be approved, then the requirement will be 1.5 meters for a structure that would be over 60 square meters. And we have to determine and see if they're going to comply with that setback requirement. They have asked for there to be no windows on the east side of the proposed secondary dwelling unit, so that the person in the unit does not peer over into the Panet property. I think this is a reasonable request on their part. They have asked about who's going to reside in the unit. Is this a temporary unit? What happens in the future when the father is not there? They understand it is the father who's going to reside in this unit. And they also want to know if it's going to be rented. We cannot regulate who's going to reside in the unit, and the unit can be rented. It's it doesn't. There's no requirement that it be the person residing therein be a relative. It can be rented. The next comment says the existing garage is on a slab and cannot support the secondary story apartment. If the foundation has to be modified, will construction affect the Panet property? In my experience, no, construction would not affect the next door. So I think that they are fine in that respect. They have commented that there's a laneway at the rear of the site, and that there are buildings and structures there. Some have been built without permits. The issue is that the town is not enforcing bylaws to get people to clean up and to complete construction of buildings. The best I can do with respect to this comment is forward it to the bylaw enforcement officer at the town and see if they could address the comment. And the next comment is if the applicant fails to complete construction or does not complete construction in a timely fashion, the structure will be an eyesore in our backyard. And the last of the comments is that the garage apartment will affect the resale value of my property. We get this comment quite frequently from neighbors. I'm not sure that I have any tools to use to address this comment, but it is a valid comment. So as a summary, this official plan amendment application is seeking to permit a second-story dwelling on the second story of an existing detached garage. The official plan only permits a secondary dwelling unit within a detached dwelling, a semi-detached dwelling, and a row dwelling. At this point, we're presenting this application to get feedback from committee and feedback from members of the public. The intent is to come back at a future date with a recommendation report. That concludes my presentation. I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you. Then we will move on into the public portion of the meeting, and we will begin with any comments from the applicant or their representative. Do we have, I see we have Mr. Ian and Jordan Moncrief on the line. Do either of them wish to speak?
Hello, this is Ian Moncrief.
Hello.
I'm just start the video.
Sure.
There I am. Can everybody see me and hear me now?
Yep, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I am a retired environmental planner, but people keep calling me to do projects, so I'm very tempted to change my phone number and email address so that I can fully retire. I am moving up from Chatham to Port Elgin to be closer to family. Specifically my daughter Jordan, who she and her partner are employees at Bruce Power, and blessed me with a beautiful granddaughter 8 months ago. It was her past mother, my late wife, always planned as to when we were retired to move up to Bruce County, because we spent every summer in Bruce County. So it's an area that we love and wanted to come to, and I'm finally going to be able to do that. When looking for appropriate real estate for a single widower, it was virtually impossible to find anything in Port Elgin that could meet my budget requirements without having to buy a whole brand new house. And it was Jordan and Bren who suggested that we could build a one-bedroom apartment on top of the garage. And being a planner, an environmental planner, but started out my career as a municipal planner, I just jumped into it and started doing the research, and to find that basically there was the town was planning to basically conform to provincial policy, housing policy under the Planning Act, as well as the county policy, but they were a little behind in terms of updating your own OP. So we made the application for the OP amendment, and we hired Amanda Tatey to come up with some conceptual designs, and we submitted the report to Bruce County, and Barbara has been working with us on moving this application through. We do have a contractor lined up, Barnwood Builders, and it just so happens that the principal of Barnwood Builders is a former building inspector for Pushlands Township down in Guelph, and has worked on, believe it or not, by coincidence, worked on some family projects down there with Jordan's brother. So he's very familiar with what he's Port Elgin and also the Ontario Building Code. And basically what we would like to try and do is to get this approval in place. There is some discrepancy, or at least interpretation, of what is the next step. As Barbara is going by the book, and I can't blame her for following procedure, we would then have to make an application now for a zoning bylaw amendment, since your updated zoning bylaw will probably not be adopted by you, the council, until June or July. And that puts us kind of behind the 8 ball, because we'd like to get this construction underway late spring. The contractor is estimating an 8-week period. And when talking with Jay Posner on this particular project, he was very supportive in terms of providing council with a demonstration project for residential or dwelling intensification in R2 areas to provide a broader range of affordable housing within the community. And when I look at what we will be making an application in the zoning bylaw for, which would be the rear setback reduction from 7 meters to 5 meters, and an increase in the square footage from 600 square feet to 900 square feet. And excuse me for using imperial measurements. At 74, I'm still old school. But that would be what we would like to council to allow us to do, is to bypass the zoning bylaw amendment and go straight to making an application for a minor variance through the Committee of Adjustment for the same features of reducing the rear yard setback, as well as the increase in the square footage of the dwelling unit. But I'll leave that to council to consider after discussing it with Jay Posner and with Barbara McGobby at the county level. We would like to have this all finished up and be able for me to move in by September 1st, mainly because Jordan and Brand are getting married in September, and it would be nice to have that all fixed up. So I am available for any questions. I have seen the concerns addressed by the neighbors, Jim and forget her name. Oh, Jim and Karen Punnett. And if through you, Mayor, if I can address each of those points, would this be the appropriate time to do so?
Well, we've had the planner address them. If you have some broad comments for us on those things, we'd be happy to hear them now. Okay, the fence issue. I'm not sure when Jim and Karen constructed the fence, but usually in a situation like that, from my experience as a professional planner and working with developers, etc., if there are two property owners and the one property wants to put up a fence, and he goes to his neighbor to split the cost, and the neighbor says, no, I can't afford that, or I don't want to do that, then the next solution is to move it off the property line 6 inches and have an OLS survey the line, and he builds the fence at his own cost, but he maintains the ownership and liability for that fence. And I think probably that's what's happened in this case. But when you take a look at this at the setbacks, as Barbara has shown what they are, the current distance between the edge of the garage and the fence is about 2 meters, and yet the required setback is, and please correct me, Barbara, but I think you said 1.7 or 1.5 meters for a side yard. And so I think that's a non-issue. I'm kind of a little amused by his asking for no windows on the east side of the building adjacent to his property line, when his 2-story building has 2 windows that overlooks our or my daughter's yard. And that, that's kind of let's put it this way, lawyers use this term, you can't suck and blow at the same time.
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Hi, it's Jordan Moncrief talking. I'm just gonna cut in here.
Well, we're not going to have a debate back and forth. No. Sorry, folks. I need to.
Oh no, I was just
we don't
say,
need to go.
We're not having any windows on there anyways. We already took that into consideration. There's absolutely no windows in the planning.
Okay, thank you. I just let's.
Okay.
We don't need to go into too much detail. So remembering we're focusing on the zoning bylaw or the official plan amendment here. So let's. We don't need to get into too much detail on the site plan issues. If we can just sort of give council the overall argument. I'm sure council will have questions for clarification on these points if there are areas that we're unclear on.
Okay. The other point that was drawn to everybody's attention was the fact that I'm being an elderly parent, and they were concerned that having to live in a dwelling unit in the 2nd story. Well, we already planned for that. There's going to be a chairlift there if my orthopedic surgeon can't help my knees. And I think we've addressed basically any concerns that Jim and Karen Panett have brought to your attention. But we would like very much to move forward on this and get Barnwood Builders to start coming up with the engineering drawings and working with Jay and his people at the municipal level to start making and make an application for a building permit, as well as with council's concerns, concurrence and attention, if we could bypass the zoning bylaw amendment, which is expensive, it's some $3,200, and go right to the Committee of Adjustment and make the application for minor variance for those two particular issues, which is only an $890 investment, so that we could move forward to this as quickly as possible. I thank you for your time. If anybody has any questions, I'm available.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So are there any members of the public who wish to speak to us on this application, to the clerk or to the planner, just to be clear?
No, there's not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. So we will then move forward with hearing from members of council. Any questions or comments from members? Vice Deputy Mayor and then Councilor Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the Jay, if I could, bypass the zoning bylaw amendment, Jay. Is that something I don't recall we've ever done? But I'd just like you to comment on that, because that's what's being asked you to have happen. So I'd really like to zero in on that comment.
Sure. Well, I would, I guess where I disagree with Mr. Moncrief, it's his term bypass. It's not bypassing the zoning relief. No matter the, presume the OPA is adopted by you, no matter, a decision has to be made to provide relief to the bylaw, whether that's done by a minor variance, which is the quicker, cheaper, maybe sort of more efficient process, or a zoning bylaw amendment, which means it comes back to council and it takes longer. There's a wider circulation. There's a longer appeal stage, so but it's a discussion, I think, that, we'd like to get some council input. It doesn't have to be at this meeting, but we can take back to the county as our administrators of that process, so we can, make sure it's done as quickly as possible.
So Jay, Mr. Mayor, Jay, this is obviously classified as a secondary dwelling suite.
Yeah, I would say it is.
Yeah. So that we changed that, Jay, was it 6 months ago now? 9 months ago? When did we bring that change into effect? Roughly.
10 months.
Yeah, 10 months ago, which permits secondary dwelling suites, not detached so much, right? Mostly attached secondary dwelling suites, Jay?
It would not mostly, only attached. And the major hurdle, and we've applied for to the county in the last month for an amendment, is we needed to amend both the county plan and the local official plan to be able to facilitate the construction of secondary units in any other structure. So that administrative, technical, I will say, I hesitate to say that it's simple, but it's very technical, planning technical, whatever that is, planning technical process takes time.
But this unit is classified as attached or detached then?
Well, this is detached. This is a unit in an ancillary structure. Yes, a garage.
Exactly. And I mean, the other point's an obvious one. One of the residents talked about, will the existing garage sustain the weight and the build on top of the garage? But I mean, it's a building permit. I mean, architecturally, you have to have an architect involved, and it doesn't mean it's going to be built, designed that it would sustain it, obviously. So, I mean, the building permit's either issued or it's not. If this council approves this change, the building department's got to approve it, obviously.
If that's a question, again, yes, the building code regulates how the foundations need to be constructed, and if it needs to be restored, repaired, or enhanced, then that's what it needs to be done.
Yeah, of course. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Are there further questions or comments? I think Councilor might have one. Councilor Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my comment had to do with
Can't hear you there on the online, Dave. Can everybody else hear Dave?
I could hear Councillor Mayette.
You heard him? Sorry, maybe just me then. Sorry about that.
It sounds like it's in the background. Now I hear nothing. Like it's coming through maybe someone else's mic at the time.
Fine, yeah. See if we can get Councillor Mayette fixed up here. Are there other questions or comments from other members? Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you're taking input from the committee, I would like to see us move forward on the accessory residential units being permitted as quickly as possible. So I support that. I have a question about the fence issue, because if I'm looking at the picture, the picture of the garage, there's a fence that looks like it is built and ends partway on the wall of the garage. This is in Barbara's report on page 2. And so I think what you're saying, you said, Barbara, is that fence was actually built in the property, right? Like it wasn't built along the property line. It was built a certain distance inside the property line, right?
Yes, so the fence belongs to the neighbor who said they built it within their property limits, but not at the common lot line.
The fence belongs to the neighbor, but they built it in the subject property inside.
So they built it on their own property. So it's not at the common lot line. It's inside of their property.
Okay, it's inside the Moncrief.
No, it's in the other property.
Oh, okay.
There's two fences, if I can, which one are you asking about,
I'm
Councillor
asking
Grace?
about the one when I'm looking at the picture on page 12, on the right-hand side, as I look at it, there's a fence, there's a shed, there's the garage, and then it's a white garage with a star on it. And then there's a lighter, newer looking fence that ends at what looks like the middle of the, on my left-hand side of the garage. Looks like it comes, from what I'm looking at, it ends in the middle of the wall.
That fence runs from the house to the corner of the garage to control our four-legged friends into the backyard. That's in the middle of the lot.
Okay, I just didn't understand what, if that was the fence in question. but it's not.
Oh, no.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, do we have Councillor Mayette working now? Councillor Mayette?
Test. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question had to do with the foundation, and I think Vice Deputy Mayor Mayette asked that question. It'll be dealt through the building permit process, building on a slab as opposed to foundation.
Yeah, we have to be, just have to be careful not to confuse the issues we're dealing with here. We should stay focused on the question of the amendment we're talking about. I don't want to get into discussing the design of the site, because that really isn't relevant to our discussion. So are there further questions or comments with regard to this application from members? Councilor Davinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Barbara. Barbara, was there any drawings submitted, early drawings submitted to Bruce County about this application?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So the drawings we received were the site plan, which is included in the report, and also the floor plans for the garage and the proposed unit above the garage.
Okay, I don't recall seeing any of that in our report. Is that normal for at this point in time? It would seem to me that those would be pretty important things to see. I don't know. Now, just to sort of get a general idea of what's in mind.
Yes, so they would be included on the website, but certainly I can include them in a subsequent report and make it available to you at that point.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
You're done? Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember on all these things, of course, is that, you know, while it is nice to see what the building might look like, the key question here is whether we ought to permit a secondary dwelling in a detached garage. I mean, and what that looks like ultimately, or, you know, the renderings, it really is only nice to know. It isn't entirely relevant. The key question is whether a secondary dwelling in a detached unit in this location is appropriate or not. Are there any other questions or comments to that effect? I don't see any. I am. Mr. McCreeve.
Through you, Mayor. There was an architectural conceptual study done with renderings and floor plans by Amanda Tatey that we had commissioned her to do, and I'm surprised that that was not included in any of the planning documents that were distributed to you. And certainly I can make that report available to council and have a PDF to you tomorrow and for distribution if Barbara doesn't have a copy of it.
We can do, Mr. Moncrief. I think Barbara, she indicated she does have that information, and it can be shared with council when this returns to us with a final recommendation. Is that good enough, Barbara?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's good.
Okay, so we can do that. I think it's important in all these cases to remember that, of course, once you amend the official plan, you know, something may be built today, but then in 30 years, the whole property may be completely tore down and reconstructed completely differently, and the amendment that you have in place will apply to the new development as well. So, you know, it's a question of the use rather than the appearance. And on that note, I guess on the note of in terms of process, Ms. Mugabe, is it your intention to come back when you do come back to council with an analysis on the question of whether the next step in this, should the official plan amendment be approved, whether the next step needs to be a zoning bylaw amendment or could indeed be a minor variance? Is there, will you provide council with an analysis of that? Usually it's unusual in that council doesn't usually weigh in on how that process plays out. It's either the planners determine whether it ought to be a zoning amendment or a minor variance. Okay, maybe you could just speak to us about how you see us proceeding should council approve the official plan amendment. What would the next step from your perspective need to be?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we do need input from committee. So usually with zoning amendments, it's for proposals that for which uses are not permitted in the zoning bylaw. That's when we usually look to zoning amendments. For minor variances, we are looking at proposals for uses that are permitted by the zoning bylaw, but they don't comply with, say, some of the provisions, and they have to be minor in nature. So I think for this proposal, we were looking at a zoning amendment because the use itself is not permitted. So depending on the direction we get from committee, we will determine if we can proceed by way of a minor variance to address some of the provisions that are deficient from a zoning perspective.
Then I think what you ought to do then, Ms. Mugabe, is when you come back with a recommendation to council, seek direction in your recommendation on that point, and produce an analysis for council to determine, so it can make a decision to guide you on that point. So I guess council, council can tell me if I'm off base here, but I think council would like to have a recommendation on that question and some analysis to make a decision when you return. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I echo your thoughts and Councillor Grace. I really don't have a lot of interest in delaying, personally. I think that we changed things around about 8 months ago with permitting secondary dwelling suites, and so I think that the quicker this comes to a decision stage, the better. I don't think we should be delaying.
Anybody wants to cost them increased time or money, but I do think we need to understand the planning implications of whatever decision we're going to make and how it conforms with the bylaw. So, yes, we'll get that question answered here when we discuss a recommendation from the planner on this amendment.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to comment, and maybe it's just me, but I lost half of what you said. You were going in and out. So did anyone else experience that, or is it just me?
No, it's
sorry about that.
Me too.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
just
Can you hear me?
microphone's getting buried.
So just so you know, Luke, you are cutting. I lost about half of what you said.
All right, can you hear me now?
You can.
No.
Yeah. But
I'm having the same issues that Dave is having, whatever that is. Anyway, all right. Well,
try to put your seat right on the microphone. It seems to be a voice activated mic.
Yeah.
Anytime you pause talking.
Yeah, I can see myself light up there, but I don't. I'm not lighting up there.
I think when you're speaking like you're speaking right. Sorry, I don't mean to, but when you're speaking right in like you're speaking, it does come through fine.
Okay.
It's when you turn your head away. Sorry.
That's all right. No, I'll stop going on and on here. You guys have heard enough from me anyway. We'll recommendation is to receive this for information. So if there's nothing further, I'll ask the planner to just remind members of the public. Oh, sorry, I see Councillor, you're in the shadows there, Councillor Davinsky.
Yes, sorry about that. I don't know what's happening. I just wanted to know through you to again, Ms. Mugabe, how soon can this happen? When can we expect it to come back to council?
We're likely looking at May.
May at this point.
Yes.
Too long. These planning issues are taking too long. They have to come back quicker than that. And I'm speaking to you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I've never spoken to Ms. Mugabe that way. What I'm saying is, I guess I'm just giving a comment. It's taking too long for some of these planning issues to come back. And even when it comes back to us, it's not over. And we won't get it till May. Surely it can be speeded up.
Yes, sure, I think just because of the volume of applications. So it does take a while to come back with some of the applications.
Did you have a comment there, Jay?
I just want to say, I don't want to nail down a date at all. I didn't, disagree slightly with Barbara about committing to May. We'll talk with her. We'll work about what files are in the queue. We try to balance this as best we can. So I'd rather go with that answer than commit to a date at any time.
I think the bottom line is our planning staff are doing the best they can to advance these files as quickly as they can. I appreciate everybody wants to see these files move as quickly as possible, but we do have a high volume of applications. So I think what I've heard there is our staff is going to commit to moving it as quickly as they can and get it back to council and advance it one way or the other as timely a way as possible.
Mr. Mayor, can I just put one last comment, please?
Mr. Mayor, yeah.
I look at the faces of our planners sometimes, and they sometimes they look a little tired. There are a lot of applications. No, I don't mean that in a rude but I mean there's a lot of applications on file, and they're pushing really hard. And I know I said earlier, let's move these things forward as quick as we can. But I do want to say that our planners do work hard. They are very busy people, and they try to move things as quickly as they can. But sometimes that's just not possible. But I wasn't pointing my fingers at anybody for not working hard enough. Believe me, that wasn't my point tonight.
No, I don't think that's it. Listen, the town of Saugeen Shores is the fastest growing community in the region, so it's going to take some time to get our applications moving through. But as I say, our staff's good, and they're going to move it as quickly as they can. So, and back to the staff then, Barbara, would you just give us those comments, or maybe you already did. I already asked you Did I already ask you to give the comments on where folks can get further information on the file? I think I did. So we're good on that point. So, all right, that brings us to the end of this public meeting then. And we're on to the final one, which is 5.3, 41T 2016.
If I could just sign out, thank you very much for your time and consideration, Council. And I look forward to meeting each and every one of you over the next few months as I become a bona fide citizen of the community.
Welcome to Bruce County. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Good evening.
So it's 41T 2016 2.46 and Z 2021-093 for Barry's Construction and Insulation Limited, Blue Water Subdivision, Ivings Drive, and Ridge Street. And we'll turn it over to our planner for the report.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So as indicated, this is an application for a draft plan of subdivision revision, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment. And that again is for Barry's Construction. So the subject lands are located at the south end of Port Elgin. The current existing intersection is Ivings Drive and Ridge Street. And the purpose of the application is to amend the subdivision, which would allow for an additional 19 townhouse dwelling lots on Ridge Street, which would be in the block that's currently zoned R42. And there would be one additional single detached dwelling lot on Ivings Drive, and that would be just at the north end of the property on this particular parcel here. So the related zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the lands, the R4 lands, specifically for the townhouse dwelling units, and that would allow for a reduced interior side yard as well as an increased lot coverage. And if approved, this would allow for a revised mix of dwelling units. So the next slide actually provides an overview of the draft plan of subdivision. I do apologize, some of the lotting lines are a bit faint, but to give just some context, again, this is Ivings Drive and Ridge Street. The proposed amendment to the block, which is currently zoned for R4, is to allow for these townhouse dwellings, which would front onto Ridge Street. And then the proposed amendment at the far west side of the property is to change this existing block, which was originally the original farm home on the property, and that ended up being in a poor state of repair and has since been demolished. And so they're looking to split that lot into two single-family residential lots, as well as a walkway servicing block. This is a close-up view of that particular area that would be affected by the revision to the draft plan of subdivision. As it relates to kind of some background context for this block here, it was identified for multi-unit residential purposes. This is still the intention for these lands, but it was determined that they're overly large for their intended purpose, and so there was an opportunity to increase the number of units overall in the subdivision by creating these additional townhomes. So with respect to just some of the site photos on the property, so this is looking from the east side of this block towards Ridge Street. And this is on Ridge Street itself. This is looking south from Ivings Drive to the CAW or Unifor lands. And this is a photo looking southeast towards across the block. And my apologies, I didn't have the right footwear on for a shot from the south end, but it's a vacant parcel, which you can see from the photos. So just some context in terms of the subdivision itself. It was draft approved in 2016. There has been one phase of the development already registered, or what that means is it's been final approved and the details have been submitted to the town's satisfaction for that purpose. There are still portions of the development that are still in the draft approval phase. And the next phase, the lapsing date for that would be in July 2024. So there is still some time to move forward with the detailed design on the next phase of that development. So the applicant is looking to, as noted, increase the number of dwelling units in the remaining lands by 20, increasing by 20 units by creating the 19 townhouse dwelling lots and one additional single detached dwelling lot on Ivings Drive. The zoning bylaw amendment, as already indicated, only applies to the townhouse dwellings. There would be no needed zoning bylaw amendment for the single family lot that would be created. As it relates to our review of the application, we did look at, again, the provincial policies, the county policy, which identifies this area as a primary urban community, and it's residential in the local official plan. The current zoning for the townhouse dwellings is R42, and that's a high density category, and the single family is already currently zoned R24. The application for the zoning purposes is looking to decrease the interior side yards for the townhouse dwelling units, and that would be reducing it from, that would be reducing it to 1.2 meters from the current 3 meter requirement. And I would note that 1.2 meters is fairly consistent with other zones and dwelling formats within the town. Typically, when it does increase in height, there's a 1.5 meter setback requirement as well. In terms of the requested change in lot coverage, they are seeking to increase the lot coverage from 35% to 60%. And for townhouse dwelling units, typically those are in the range of about 35 to 45%, but there have been approvals both in Saugeen Shores and elsewhere in the county, which have approved higher lot coverages, up to 55% in some instances. So before you today is just the recommendation report. We would be looking to come back at a later date with, today is the information report. We would be looking to come back later with a recommendation report. Included with that would be the zoning bylaw amendment, but we would also be providing for the committee's consideration the revised conditions of draft approval. And based on the town's comments, they're very supportive of the application coming forward. They would be looking to add a condition which would allow for purpose-built secondary dwelling units as part of the draft plan conditions. So that can certainly be incorporated in those revised conditions when they're brought forward to you. And in terms of other agency comments that we did receive, Bruce County Transportation had no comments, nor did the historic Saugeen Métis. The Grey Bruce Catholic District School Board also had no comments, and the Blue Water District School Board did come forward with a request for conditions to be included. Those weren't included in the original draft plan approval, but they are a standard request from the school board at this point in time. And we will consider that when we bring those revised conditions forward for your consideration. And the last agency that did provide comment at the time this report was drafted was the Conservation Authority, and they found the proposal to be acceptable. There were no public comments provided on the subject applications. I did receive one inquiry from a member of the public, but hopefully answered the questions relating to that. There was no follow-up coming from that discussion. So just as a recap, it is a major revision to the draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment. Again, the zoning bylaw amendment only applies to the townhouse dwelling units and not the proposed creation of the single family. And this report is being brought forward for your information, and I'll bring back a further report at a later date, but I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. So that moves into the public portion of the meeting, and we have the applicant, Mr. Stuart Doyle, who is on my list. Is Stuart with us? Mr. Doyle.
Oh, sorry, I was getting promoted there to the panel, so I lost control for a minute. I've been promoted in a few years.
We can't have that.
No, nice to see everybody again. I'm not used to the late nights as much anymore, but nonetheless. Just real quick, I'm just here to answer any questions. Just as some clarity, through you, Mr. Mayor, the townhouses on Ridge Street, they have a coverage of 55%. The only reason on these ones adjacent that we're going to 60 is because we're going to try a little different type of townhouse. They're a little narrower, try to increase the density slightly. So on the other units, there's actually a walk through the garage. You can access your rear yard through the garage. On these, we're going to eliminate that, and there'll be access easements through the back. So just a little bit of a different type of townhouse on that particular one. The other item, one of the reasons we did this on Ridge Street is from my former career, I didn't like putting roads in with houses only on one side. So I was able to double front the road and also continue the density of the townhouse block behind it. I think that's a win-win. And just a note on the secondary suite for everybody's information. I know the town had a comment in there about secondary suites for the draft plan. In 2020, we did 6 of them in this particular development, secondary suites, all requested by clients. In 2021, we did 8. 5 of those were requested, 3 of those we just built and sold. And then so far in 2022, we've had 3 clients that have asked for those already. So whether you ask, whether you put those as draft permit conditions or not, folks are requesting them and we're building them anyway, just for food for thought.
Very good. Thanks for that. Are there any members of the public who want to speak to us on this one this evening?
No, there's not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we're on then to questions or comments from members of the committee. Are there questions or comments from any committee members? We'll start with Councillor Grace and then come to the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stuart. I've just got a quick question based on your comment about the change that this is going to be narrower, and you were saying that in the previous design, people would access, is that the backyard through their garage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on a lot of the townhouses we've done in Saugeen Shores, not all of them, there's a door in the garage that gives you direct access to your backyard. So we generally made those about 30 feet wide, and we find them very successful. However, in talking with the town and looking at this, we thought we'd do it a more traditional townhouse where the density is a little higher, just to offer a different product in this particular development, a little smaller square footage.
So how would people access their backyard in that design, in this new design then?
So
or the design you're proposing?
Yeah, again, through you, Mr. Mayor, generally with traditional townhouse setback or layouts, they're accessed through an access easement through the backyard, and that would be developed through the subdivision agreement.
Okay, I guess I'm not visualizing it. Can they access their backyard from the home?
Yes, through the patio door, through their, but what I was saying with the other ones, they're able to bring lawn implements or different type
of, okay.
Through the garage, so they don't have to go through their home.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for clearing that up. Thanks.
Right.
Okay, Vice Deputy Mayor.
I was just a comment, Mr. Mayor and Stu. Thanks for your presentation and for all the great development you're doing in town. And I'm looking forward to this coming back and supporting it. I know we're not supposed to make those kinds of commitments tonight, but I think what you're doing is great in our community, and the revised mix of housing, I think, is a good thing. And I was going to ask you about secondary dwelling suites this evening, but you covered it off. So it's good to hear people are asking for secondary dwelling suites. I think people are starting to realize that it's what you can do in our community now, and it's a great way to put into our inventory additional rental units. So it's working. We're making some progress, and just want to thank you for all you're doing in our community from an investment standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Myatt, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, actually, I was looking at the requested changes here, and in particular, I'm looking at the other corner where it's proposed to have 2 single-family dwelling lots created. I wonder if the planner had taken any pictures of that corner to visualize what those were. I didn't get the chance to drive by there today, but it looks like they're going to be extra large sized lots, like a premium sized lot. And just wondering, is that intended to be just for a single home on there? Or because that one looks like it's about 1/3 of an acre or so. Maybe Stu's going to build his house there.
Sadly, I'm stuck where I'm at, but thanks. So the block that's behind those, that's more for future use. The reason there's a walkway on that is twofold. Is the in the future, if something happens behind there, it could be an access for pedestrian walkways or servicing. And then the 2 lots, I don't know if you asked this or not, but we contemplated going to 3, but just with the layout of the one furthest to the north and frontage, it just made sense to do that. And it goes right against the stormwater pond as well. So there's a few constraints there. So we just thought that was the best layout for that.
Okay, very good. Just wondered, did the planner get a chance to take any pictures to show what those look like, those lots? I guess they're just probably piled with soil right now, are they?
Or yeah, or the farm remnants from last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from members on this one? The only comment I would make is that I first off, I appreciate getting that update from you, Stu, about the number of secondary suites that you've built in the last couple of years. And it would be interesting, and I'm sure our staff is working on sort of getting a broader sense across the municipality, because I think if you're experiencing that, other developers are as well. I would still be interested in seeing some reference to them in the subdivision agreement, and as having a certain percentage of them or a certain number as part of the agreement. I think that only because I think I really want to set that precedent. We have set it. The town has required it in a few cases already, and I'd like us to keep doing it and have it in every one of them. So I'm glad to hear that it's good business too, and you know, ideally our agreements and our regulations will align with good business, and then it will make sense. So anyway, that's my comment. I do support those comments from Saugeen Shores staff, and look forward to seeing it come back with some reference to secondary suites. But that's my only comment. Did you have a comment, Stu? I saw you come off mute there.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, that of course is for information. And maybe, Karina, you could just remind the public where they can go if they're interested in being kept up to date on this file.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. You can contact the county at our email address, which is bcplpe@brucecounty.on.ca. You can also contact us through the county department by phone, or stop by our office. We are open to the public at our Port Elgin office and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our public meetings this evening. And so we're on to reports. And we have 2 reports this evening. And the first one is 6.2.1 on Z 2021-058 Thorncrest Outfitters on Carlisle Street. And we'll turn it over to the planner, Ms. Mugabe, to present that one.
Yes, thank you once again, Mayor Shabolo. I'll just bring up the presentation. So this application was before committee just last month on February 28th. The site is 484 Carlisle Street in Southampton. The main building on this site it was built as an inn and operated as an inn between 1840s and around 1950. The landowner is seeking to re-establish the inn use on that property. The landowners own outfitted stores, one in Port Elgin and one in Southampton. And as part of their business, they provide canoe and kayak rental services. The rental equipment and vehicles are stored on the subject land. Last year, they got a building permit to construct a storage building on the site for their equipment. They are now seeking permission to convert that storage building into an outfitter store. So that would be the third outfitter store that they would own. The purpose of this application is to change the agricultural zone to commercial recreation special, and they are seeking a limited range of uses. The first being the renting and or retailing of kayaks and canoes, related accessories, apparel, and other goods that are typically found in an outfitter store. They are also seeking to re-establish the inn with a maximum of 8 guest rooms. They're also seeking to have a single detached dwelling and accessory buildings and structures as permitted uses. The only relief that's required is in regards to the front yard setback to reduce that setback from 7.5 meters to 4.22 meters. So we have received comments, 2 sets of comments from members of the public. We received a letter of support for this proposal from the Southampton BIA, and I included that letter in the planning report. We received additional comments from the neighbor to the south, and for the most part, they reiterated their previous comments, but on this slide, I just have included the newer comments. This neighbor opposes this application. They've appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal against the county's approval of the associated county official plan amendment. They have submitted as comments for this zoning application their appeal document in its entirety. So I included that in the staff report. So one of the concerns expressed is that they have claims to a portion of Carlisle Street. So this information was not imparted to us as we're processing the official plan amendment application. So this information was not provided to County Council before they had made a decision on the application. In discussions with town staff, they think that these comments should be forwarded to the town solicitor. So they are the ones that will address these comments. The next comment was with respect to the mapping that was part of the notice of decision for the official plan amendment application that was mailed to members of the public. They say that the mapping shows Carlisle Street as larger than it truly is, where it intersects Cemetery Road, and that this image includes a portion of our property. Now, I should just explain that what we try to show with the notice of decision is to include mapping of the subject lands, and that is to show the property that is affected by an amendment. Now, as part of that, we also include surrounding land uses. But in relation to those surrounding land uses, we do not necessarily make sure that they're accurate measurements for those sites. So that sort of explains why there might be a discretion between what is shown on the mapping and what they say is the accurate measurements. There was also the comment that there were complaints about perceived delays to sending out the notice of decision for the county official plan amendment application. The Planning Act allows 15 days to send a notice to members of the public after a decision has been made on an official plan or zoning bylaw amendment. So we met that time frame. Unfortunately, in sending out the notice, the planning technician did miss the hunters, so they were not circulated originally. But when I realized this, we were able to resolve that. We quickly sent out the notice by email to the hunters. So they received it 2 days after everyone else had received the notice. So it's certainly not intentional on the part of the planning technician. It was an honest mistake. Then the next comment is with respect to their concern that the establishment of a retail store and inn conflicts with the conservation area that is Dennis Dam. So that area is under it's crown lands, so it's under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Natural Resources. We circulated the application to the ministry. They did not respond, but we had met with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And for those two ministries, their interest was mostly to do with removing agricultural lands from agricultural productivity. So that was the basis of their interests. We circulated the comments to the Conservation Authority. They find the application acceptable. They have no concerns whatsoever that there will be impact to the environmental features in the area. So just to recap, this zoning amendment application is seeking to change the agricultural zoned portion of the site to commercial recreation special. Approval would permit limited retail commercial uses, single detached dwelling and buildings and accessory and accessory uses. This proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It would implement the county official plan amendment, which was recently approved by the county, but has been appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If this application is approved, the amending bylaw will only come into force and effect if the county official plan gets approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal. The recommendation is that this application be approved. That concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Mugabe. And give me a second here and I'll bring up the recommendation. Sorry about that. So it's recommended that the committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2021-058 for the site described as Plan 234, lots B, C, E, and Lane, Part Lot D, reference Plan 3R7912, Parts 1, 2, 3, as attached, and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption, and that council adopt the necessary zoning bylaw, noting that it cannot come into effect unless the associated county official plan amendment is approved by the Ontario Land Tribunal. Discussion, questions, or comments? Councilor and the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Barbara, you spoke about the and gave us the information on the Hunter's appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and then brought up that there was new information about a claim to part of Carlisle Street. Does that affect this particular property? Like in terms of, does it have an effect upon the status of this property? The property we're talking about, the property in question?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, from my understanding, the claim that they have on a portion of Carlisle Street comes into play because they have been concerned about the volume of traffic resulting from the retail store and the in use if those applications are approved. So I think that's why they have now decided to advise that they own a portion of Carlisle Street.
Okay. Okay, well, I understand that now. Thank you. I will be supporting this application. This one of the concerns of the ministries was the the argument or their concern that the property might be removing valuable farmland from that possibility, and this property has not been a working farm. So I think that concern of the ministry is a moot point. Personally, I think these kinds of businesses will be an asset to our area in terms of tourism. And I'm also pleased as a member of the town's Heritage Committee to see this building, bringing this proposal, bringing new life to our heritage and to this heritage building. So I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, so I have the Vice Deputy Mayor and then I'll get Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of Councilor Grace mentioned about the tribunal and the land ownership, so that's covered off. And I did want to thank the planners for the the expediency of bringing this one back. Barbara, great work, and Karina, I just really appreciate Barbara, the great work you've done on this, and I'm probably trying to cozy up a little bit to the planners after my last comment saying move a little quicker. So, but I really appreciate you getting this back as quick as you did. It's and I think this from Cheryl from a heritage standpoint, this is really a good news story for our community. It really is. So these kinds of small businesses are very important. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think that's really important. I'll just reiterate it, given our last conversation, that this planning staff turned this file around very quickly at our request. And so I would just repeat the Vice Deputy Mayor's appreciation for that. Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I too will be supporting this application. It makes a lot of sense from many fronts. As was already stated, from a tourism point of view, there's a major initiative underway with town staff to increase the tourism that one of our major components, the Saugeen River and Saugeen Shores, can bring into our area. And this only adds to the great work that Thorncrest has done over the past, I read, 25 years that they've been in the business of operating an outfitting business on the Saugeen River. And speaking as the president of the Lake Huron Fishing Club, we have a almost constant presence down there, particularly in the spawning seasons, working with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. I think it's actually Mines Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, working on trapping and tagging fish. And many of our members use that road and area down there for fishing. And I think this would only benefit them. There's people that come from a long way away to fish the world-renowned Saugeen River, and to give them an inn where they can stay within a stone's throw of that prime fishing spot is a great thing. So on those fronts and a few more, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davinsky.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Barbara and Jay. Indeed, this one has come through very quickly as we had requested. Hopefully the others will as well, but that's for another day. What I wanted to ask about this one was, if we approve, and I'm ready to approve it as well. If we approve, do we expose ourselves to a second Land Tribunal Council meeting challenge?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they could appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, sorry, to the Ontario Land Tribunal, because the appeal that was lodged so far was just in regards to the official plan amendment application.
Okay, so that
and if I may,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jay.
no, I just was going to, but they would likely combine the two matters. Like typically the board, previously LPAT, and now the OLT, they like to combine matters, so there's only one hearing to make a decision. So the theory is make a decision on this. If the hunters want to appeal, let them appeal, and they both can go to the board at the same time.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I too myself will be supporting this one, but I do have a few issues with it. Myself, I guess my question would go back to Barbara here. So like I said, I do support this. I support the business. I like the idea of it. I just have a bit of an issue with the process, I guess, and I just want to be clear on it. When they started out building this storage facility, as they called it, when they started the construction, at that time, I'm guessing with the construction of the building, the sign that went up before everything else had happened on it, should this have been controlled? Should this have come to us sooner, I guess, is what my question would be here. Should this have been caught, I guess, in the original building permit stages, or I guess whatever through that process, if this was the known intent of the building the whole time, I guess would be my first question there, sorry.
Yes, so the first time I got to know about the current proposal was when they filed these applications. So the building permit was issued for the storage building through the town. We were not involved with that, and they did not require planning approval for that because the storage building is a permitted use under the current zoning. So maybe if they had known at the time that they were contemplating this additional use, if they had explained to town staff, then maybe we could have gotten the applications sooner, but I really can't say.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, and Mr. Mayor, through you, just kind of a comment with that. That's like I said, I do support this. I think it's going to be a great addition down there. It will be a good thing. I just myself have the frustration with the fact that the building's already up, it's done. Even if I didn't support this, our hands are already tied, and that's where my issue lies with this. Once again, I do want to say that I do support it. I didn't want it to come across the wrong way. I just the feedback I've gotten from people, I just wanted to ask those questions. That's all. Thank you.
I think just to be clear on that, it's, it's not a question of the building, it's a question of the use. So although, I mean, you can build a building, you can build, on a farm, it's agriculture, you could build I have a farm and I got lots of big buildings on it and they're permitted to be there, they're sheds and things. But if I were to turn one of them into an inn, or if I were to turn one of them into a store, another store, I guess in my case, I would have to get permission to do that. And so the Thorns may own this building and may have built it in accordance with the zoning bylaw on the building code, but they can't turn it into a store until they get zoning permission. So, I don't think, what I would say is I don't think anyone has done anything untoward here. And I think that our bylaws have been enforced, and until these bylaws are, until this bylaw is approved and until the LPAT process, the OLT process completes itself, a store can't open there, and it won't be possible until the bylaws have been amended.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any further comments to this one or questions? I just wanted to make one comment. I had raised it when we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago with regard to so as has been pointed out, this piece of property is zoned agricultural at the moment. It's considered prime agriculture under the Bruce County official plan, but it's important to note that Bruce County is working through a process of renewing its official plan, and one of the things that it has done is something called Lear mapping, and that's the intention of that mapping is to look at the agricultural zones and decide what areas truly are prime agriculture and which are not. And in the case of this property, if you look at it's essentially draft mapping at this point, the mapping that's been done has shown this whole area of Southampton would be considered potentially prime, not prime, but potentially prime agriculture. And the reason, and although there aren't any policies around that at the moment, the overall intent would be to see lands that are potentially prime be open to a broader range of development opportunities than your prime agricultural land. So although none of that is in effect at this moment and it's all in the draft stage, what I can say is that it seems clear that we're heading in a direction where this entire part of Southampton is going to, I think, move out of prime agriculture into some other type of designation, which will permit things just like this to happen, because we recognize that in proximity to the settlement area, it makes sense to have a broader range of land uses available on those properties. So I think I think that this, as others have said, this is a good amendment. It's for a use that makes sense in a place where it makes sense. And I think any concern about agricultural potential is, as Councillor Grace pointed out, it has never been agricultural and has no agricultural potential, this particular location, but it's also, the county is heading in the direction of taking this out of prime agriculture altogether, in my view. So I certainly support the recommendation. So if there's nothing further, you've heard the recommendation. I'll ask all in favor. That is carried. Okay, so we're now moving on to the final part. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm leaning right into this thing, so I'm just hoping that it's all right. Okay. Second. So we're on then finally to 6.2.2 Z 2022-083 for Jennifer Ferguson at 272 Saugeen Beach Road, and the planner.
Yes, thank you once again, Mr. Chair. I'll just share my screen. Yes, so this zoning amendment application, it was before committee for a public meeting last December. So the property is 272 Saugeen Beach Road in the former town of Saugeen. The site is presently occupied by a cottage. The landowner is proposing to redevelop the site with a two-story seasonal cottage and a garden shed. There's going to be a new septic system in the rear of the property. The new cottage is going to be constructed at the property lot line, which is an improvement from the current situation because right now this existing dwelling, the deck associated with this existing dwelling is actually within the road allowance, and the existing septic is also within the road allowance. The proposal has been revised to address some of the concerns that have been expressed by committee at the last meeting. So the concerns, I guess, were in regards to the potential liability to the town if parking is to be provided on street. So committee had wanted to see a driveway and some on-site parking. So this current proposal does include a driveway and on-site parking. This has been achieved by shifting the new cottage further to the north, which has created additional space on the south side to accommodate a driveway. The purpose of this application is to allow a new zone for this site to facilitate the redevelopment. Oops. The new zone will carry forward existing special provisions which relate to the requirement for the lot to accommodate on-site septic system for development to occur. There's relief requested to reduce the front yard setback from 6 meters to 0 meters. There's relief requested to reduce the north side yard setback from 1.5 meters now to 0.9 meters, and the south side setback from 3 meters to 2.4 meters. Relief is requested to reduce the parking space width from 2.75 meters to 2.4 meters. And relief is requested to locate the garden shed 0.6 meters from the rear and interior lot lines, whereas the minimum requirement is 1.2 meters. So with respect to the relief requested for the front yard setback, it's quite a deviation from the standard for development. But I think we have to be cognizant that this is a lot that was created prior to any formalized planning, and therefore it does not comply with the residential lot standards of the current zoning bylaw. This is a very small site. It's 295 square meters. Today's standard size for a residential lot is 450 square meters. So considering that this is a lot of record which is already developed, I think there must be some flexibility to allow for redevelopment to occur. With respect to the relief requested for the yard setbacks, the south side setback of 2.4 meters will allow for on-site parking and will accommodate a driveway, but also it provides sufficient space to access the rear yard in the event that maintenance is required for the septic system that's to be located in the rear yard. With respect to the relief that's required for the shed, there are two neighbors that would be affected, and the neighbor to the rear has actually submitted a letter of support for this proposal. His dwelling is situated quite far from the lot line, so there is very little impact, if any, to that neighbor. Respecting the neighbor to the side yard, the shed is not lined up with the current dwelling on that site. And also because the shed is not a garage where there could be noise emission from vehicles, and is not a dock kennel where there could be the potential for odor. So I think that there will be very limited, if any, impact to the neighbors as a result of the shed being located close to the lot lines. So as a summary, this zoning amendment application is required to replace the residential first, is requested to replace the residential first density R12 zone with a new site-specific zone to facilitate redevelopment. The proposed development is an improvement from the current situation where parking is on the street and the deck and septic system are located within the road allowance. This proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. It generally meets the intent and purpose of the official plans, and it generally also meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. The recommendation is approval of this application. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. So it is recommended that committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2021-083 for the site described as Plan 326 Lot 9, former Township of Saugeen, as attached, and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for adoption. Questions or comments from members of the committee? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, excuse me, I will be supporting this. We asked the applicant to make several changes, specifically parking, and they've gone above and beyond. I believe it's a good plan. So I like what they did, and I look forward to seeing the finalized project.
Okay, thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to echo, Deputy Mayor's comments. I think that, we've corrected the septic system situation, moving to the backyard off town property. Parking now is on their property. And so I just think it's a good recommendation to support. I'll be supporting. And Jay, I guess, they still, there's lots of land there. I live down that area. There's nothing stopping them from still parking out front. It's probably going to happen anyways, but there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Well, no, I guess it's certainly, I can't evade that question. I do it at home in Owen Sound. We have driveways that lead from the paved portion of the road to the front of a garage, for example, and there's just parking there. And it's, I don't think we're even going to know 90% of the time. But the main reason for doing this, and I don't want to, it's not all jokes here, although I'm happy to give you my 7-minute routine if you really want to hear it, is that we wanted to ensure that the town had an opportunity, if they needed to rebuild Saugeen Beach Road, who knows, 20, 30 years from now, and not be encumbered by this potential outcome. As much as we may have supported parking as a permanent solution, this was an opportunity, and the developer or landowner was willing to adjust their plans. So
he corrects an old encroachment, and I think it was good that what the residents did, what planners have done, and they can now park to the south of their cottage on their property. And you're right, someday we need to construct that road. That's one less problem we have to deal with. So thanks for your good work on this, Jay, staff.
7 minutes, Jay. Holy smokes. That's
I tried to get a small amount. I can do 70 minutes if you like. Get my hour on. I want to be on Netflix here.
So. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing that. Questions or comments from members of the committee? I agree with my colleagues and appreciate the willingness of the applicant to make these changes. I think they're good changes, and appreciate staff's work. And it's obviously we want to facilitate work like this and do it in a way that solves some problems for the municipality. So I think it's a win-win. So you've the recommendation, and I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the agenda, and I have a resolution that this planning committee meeting of March 21, 2022 hereby adjourns at 9:02 p.m. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Carr. All in favor?